Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this evening, organised by the SAS Committee Association. As you see by the title, we're talking about new to the SAS role, all you've ever want to know but afraid to ask. Well, here is your opportunity to hear it and to ask it. My name is Dr. Thomas James. I'm a specialty doctor in anaesthetics at Bradford Teaching Hospitals Trust. I'm a former, recently stepped down member of the SAS Committee of the Association of Anaesthetists, and so helping, supporting, mentoring, if you want to call it that, SAS doctors and specialists new to their role has been something that's been really close to my heart throughout my time as a SAS doctor. So I'm hoping we can bring this to a wider audience. So a few housekeeping rules just to start us off at the start. Thank you very much for attending. First of all, we've got just over 50 people registered for this, and you will all receive a link for this meeting, which will arrive tomorrow to watch back. So, and there will be some people who've registered who are unable to see it now, but they'll be given the link later. We've got many delegates, so we won't have your microphone switched off. So any questions, and I hope there'll be loads of questions coming, please submit them through the chat function, and I'll be keeping an eye on that throughout that. We'll have all the talks, and then we'll have questions to the whole panel afterwards. A few things: you can use the orange screen on the top right of your control panel to reduce the size of your control panel to see the screen better. Speakers will be displaying their screens, so if you click off and you can't see the webinar, click the blue or the orange flower icon, should be in the test bar. When switching between each speaker, there's going to be a little pause, so just wait a few seconds whilst we start there. And the usual thing we say these things, this is an educational scientific meeting, so we'd expect anyone reporting outside this to do so responsibly and accurately if they're sharing details, but that's what we say for everything. So welcome everybody. So I imagine many of you joining us will be SAS doctors, perhaps some of you are trainees interested in what the role involves or are wondering about it, or you might even be consultants who are responsible for managing or working with or some other contact with SAS doctors. Starting out in a SAS role can be a challenging moment for many anaesthetists in their career. Often you've come out of the sort of relative security, if you can call it that, but maybe a training program where everything is a bit more organized for you and you know more what you're meant to be doing. There are set progress and goals, or maybe your first role into the UK and the NHS, which can be a Byzantine structure to negotiate at the best of times. So sometimes it can be somewhat bewildering to start a new role, to understand the contracts, the appraisal, the NHS, the support, the structures, so on. And the aim of this webinar is really to give you some support about these issues, some advice, where to look for it, some top tips, and to give you an opportunity to ask any questions you wish to ask for us about it. We have got a panel here involving some SAS doctors who are very new to the role, some who are less new to the role, some who've been working in the UK for many years, some who are much more new to the UK. So we've got a good spread of people here, all throughout our different stages of our career. So what is an SAS doctor? I mean, there's the formal, I guess, and the informal answer. The formal answer is that a SAS doctor includes specialty doctors, specialist grade doctors, and associate specialists. And these are doctors who've got at least 4 years of postgraduate training, and 2 of which in their relevant specialty. And they are permanent posts. They are posts that tend to have more of a focus on service development, but as we'll hear later, that doesn't mean that's their pure role. And they're alternative and becoming increasingly alternative to the traditional career roles in consultant or general practice. People choose these roles for many different reasons, maybe because they wish to focus on the career, on the patient, direct patient care. Maybe it's for the geographical stability. Some people, it's because for whatever reason, training didn't perhaps work out for them, or they're struggling to get into training programs, especially with the recent competition. So there's many, many reasons, and SAS doctors themselves are as diverse as the reasons they went into that. Of course, the informal answer is that, as they've been described by Jagnan Pala, the BMA, is that SAS doctors quite simply are the hidden heroes of the NHS. And much like our more illustrious namesakes in the armed forces, we often fly under the radar, with many people not really aware of who we are and what we do. And yet the reality is that SAS doctors play a vast, essential role. They make up about 20% of the anaesthetic workforce, and especially in DGHs, make up a large part of care, especially propping up out-of-hours rotas in obstetrics, intensive care, acutes, and so on. And many places just wouldn't do it. But there is so much more to the SAS role that I want people to hear about than just providing on-call provision. So this is what we're going to talk about in this webinar. We're going to talk about what SAS doctors do, who they are, how you can develop in the role. As I said, the minimum requirements to be a SAS doctor are 4 years of postgraduate experience, 2 of which in the specialty. So you can imagine it starts out at, I guess, a comparable level would be sort of ST3 level. But the other end of the scale, there'll be many SAS doctors with 20 plus, 25 years plus of experience in the NHS, in anaesthetics, who really, they take on, they lead services, they are the leads for their areas, they're the go-to person for that. So we're a very diverse group, which is why one size fits all approach doesn't really work. It's opportunities, it's a growing role, more people are opting for this role, and so we'll have a chance to talk about how to make the most of this role, find out what it is. What an SAS role isn't is one of the sort of locally employed doctor roles, of which are myriad terms: trust doctors, trust registrars, locum doctors, clinical fellows. The difference is that a SAS post is it's one of the 3 nationally recognised contracts in hospitals. You've got trainee consultant contracts, you have got the consultant contracts, and you have the SAS contract. That means it is on national terms and conditions that have been agreed between employers, NHS employers, and the BMA, and there are certain things you can expect and certain things that have to be ready to do. Whereas all the various other roles you may hear about, they are trust roles, and they can't, and you are really at the whim and the mercy of the trust for terms and conditions. There may be some people in this call, or you may know of people who you think are working very much in a SAS role, but aren't being recognised as that. And I hope from hearing what we're talking about this, you'll realise the benefits of being specifically on a SAS contract, and you might see why, have some conversations with your management and your clinical leads about why you think you should be a SAS doctor, with the benefits and protections of being on national terms and conditions come. So that's who SAS doctors are. As we said, a diverse group, and you'll see our panel is a diverse panel of people at various different stages and interest in their anaesthetics career, and we'll just go on to talk about some of these areas. Must mention that we've had a couple of people unable to attend from the panel because, as you can imagine, at this time of year, COVID has not gone away. We've got a few people struggling with ill health or very busy trusts and unable to make it. So we've had to slightly rejig the programme, but I think we are still going to cover everything that's been, everything that we talked about, everything that was promised in the programme. So I'm going to hand over now to Nilofer Ahmed, and she's a specialty doctor at Airedale Hospital in Yorkshire. She's a member of the SAS Committee Association, and she's going to talk about her tips about starting out in the UK and how to make the most of that position. So I'll hand over to Nilofer. Thank you very much.
Nilofer, you're muted.
So apologies, we'll just give us 30 seconds whilst we get this sorted out, whilst we the technical problems. Are you there, Nilofer?
Next webinar. I'm Dr. Nilofer Ahmed, and I will be talking to you about starting out in the UK as a new NHS doctor and my 10 top tips for it. For many doctors new to the UK, the General Medical Council is usually the first point of contact. As well as issuing your licence to practice, the GMC offers several other resources which you may find useful. They have a free online workshop, Welcome to the UK Practice. It offers practical advice exploring different ethical scenarios that you may encounter in your day-to-day life as a doctor in the NHS. The practical guidance around a series of real-life ethical scenarios in areas which you may encounter, such as consent, confidentiality, raising concerns, care for children and young people, and prescribing. It's a workshop which the GMC recommends you only book once you have confirmation of starting work in the UK, but it can be accessed whilst you are still abroad. A blog which has also been recommended by the General Medical Council is by Dr. Mariam Murad, who is a paediatric trainee from Egypt. She talks about how she experienced life changes from Cairo, where she qualified, to moving to London, and she shares her tips and advice on the process. Once you start work in the NHS, you'll be welcomed with an induction process. Now, it's important that this induction process is tailored to the needs of international medical graduates, as research shows that unless IMGs experience a positive start to their new roles, it's likely to impact their confidence, their sense of inclusion, and their career progression. There is a dedicated IMG induction as per national guidelines, which is supported by e-learning for health and an induction program available for the IMGs. The aim of this program is to welcome, value, and support all IMGs to the NHS. Alongside signing your contract for work, you should consider the use and subscription to different unions. You have the Defence Union, which are indemnity providers. It is essential for you to cover against your legal costs and claims for any damages. The NHS is obliged to provide indemnity for all its NHS staff within the UK, but it is highly recommended that you have private indemnity cover for yourself also. It is security against or exemption from legal liability for your own actions. You should also consider the use of and subscription to a trade union. It does not cover against medical indemnity for professionals, negligence claims, but its function is to protect you in other ways, from rota discrepancies to contract checking, dealing with maternity pay or other salary-related issues, and also lobbying with related stakeholders regarding the overall well-being of doctors in the UK. The MPS is a defence union which has a fantastic podcast series titled Headliner Series. These are aimed at international medical graduates and talk about the transition into the NHS, the well-being process, connecting with patients, and the power of empathy. You will find many people in your workplace who have dedicated roles to help support you through your time at work. You may find that your trust has a dedicated IMG lead who is there to help welcome, support, and get you settled into your new role into the NHS. Most trusts now have SAS tutors who have been given the role to oversee the development of SAS doctors within the organisation and have responsibility for the SAS Development Fund and how it is used. Most departments will also have a SAS LNC rep who will be the negotiating person between you as an employee and the trust with regards to any contractual issues. The Freedom to Speak Up Guardian is a reasonably new initiative, and most trusts have now adopted this. It provides staff within a trust to have a safe and confidential setting in which they can raise matters of concern with the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian and discuss any problems that they may be facing. It may be within one individual or within a team or a department as a whole. You should also make yourself familiar with your medical educational department, who are responsible for providing you with adequate medical education development for your job role. For supervision and support in the clinical setting, you should look at adopting an educational clinical supervisor, a person who will be there to support you through any needs that you have in the clinical setting, and mainly there for feedback. You can use video observations or reflection for discussion and feedback into your practice in the UK. It can be quite overwhelming starting a new job, knowing whether you're doing the right thing, whether it is acceptable practice, what is expected of you, and what should you be doing. You can also look on to setting up a mentor, somebody who will guide you through the processes that are needed to excel in your career, to progress in your career, You may want to find a mentor with a particular experience or a career path, or somebody who may have a young family like yourself, or somebody who is less than full-time, if that's a career choice that you like to make. Somebody that is relatable for you. Another method of having some support within the clinical setting is to have a peer buddy. Now, these are useful members of staff who are working at the same contractual level as yourself, who are doing the same job role as you. So you observe and buddy up with these people to see how they run their day-to-day practice, giving you a better idea of what is expected of you and how your practice should look. In and amongst all of this, it is crucial that you look after yourself. There will be times where you want to say yes, and you should be saying yes to any opportunities that you'd like to take on. But it's also really important to learn how to say no. Do not let situations or people take advantage of you. It may be something that you think will be of benefit to you, but again, at the same time, it may not be the right time for you to take on this activity or job or venture. Learn how to say no. You need to also recognize the concept of differential attainment. This is a known gap in attainment levels of different groups of doctors. And research suggests that doctors of Black, Asian, and ethnic minority background will not perform as well as their white English colleagues. There's been research that was commissioned in 2016-17 considering the causes of differential attainment in medical education. And they particularly looked at challenges that were faced by Black and minority ethnic doctors and international medical graduates. From this, many interventions have been identified and recognized and are used to be delivered by local education organizations, which are aimed at addressing these issues. The GMC has a good document named Promoting Excellence, looking at the equality and diversity considerations in education and training. Most importantly, do not rush. Do not rush into doing things. Take your time and make decisions which are good for you, your family, and your life at that moment. This takes me on to my next top tip of taking your time. You need to acknowledge that you're moving your life and most often the lives of your family to a new country. This is a huge task. Take your time to settle in before embarking on any projects. Accepting the change, taking in the change, and giving yourself time to settle in. It's okay to say that you need more time and that you're not ready yet, or you've not done this before, or you may need it to be shown to you again. You may also consider taking a more junior role to begin with, to allow yourself time and space to settle into the role, not giving yourself a huge challenge mentally and physically to take on a job role which may be challenging to you. Once you've settled down to life in the UK, you may want to plan for the future, but do this step by step. You can start by understanding the appraisal process. You may want to meet with your appraiser and ask for advice. Introduce yourself, ask them what is expected of you. Get to familiarize yourself with the process. Is there anything you need to complete before you meet them? I would highly recommend keeping a log of all your work, your training, your education, non-clinical work as well as all the reflection of the work that you've done to date. You may want to consider your long-term goals, such as taking exams or CSER. Your appraisal will be a good point to log all this information and review on a yearly process. A further top tip in looking after yourself is the importance of socializing. It's crucial that you meet other international medical graduates within your trust. It's important to network, to familiarize yourself with people who are going through similar situations as you. Attend conferences, use your study budget, get to meet people within your department or your specialty who have been through what you are going through. join your local place of worship, find like-minded people, join local clubs, sports and activities. My most important tip for starting out as a new doctor in the UK is ask for help. Do not be afraid to ask questions. If you are being shown what to do, how to do something, ask if you do not understand. Even if you do understand and you need more clarification, still ask. It is very common practice that doctors who've come newly from abroad hesitate, find it difficult to voice their opinion, to raise any concerns. But I'd just like to stress how important it is to speak up and ask for help. Thank you for your time, and I hope you found these tips useful for starting out to a new life in the UK as a doctor in the NHS.
Thank you very much indeed, Nilofer, for that talk and some really helpful top tips. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions from people wondering either about how they can ask some questions themselves, or perhaps how they can support their colleagues or other members of their department who are starting out in the NHS. So again, I'd encourage everyone to put some questions into the chat box, and we're going to have questions through the panel at the end of the meeting. So next up, I'm afraid it's me again. You have to hear from me, and I'm going to be talking a bit about appraisal, revalidation, and career development, which might seem to be three separate topics, but actually I'm a strong believer in appraisal myself, but they are very much linked topics, because it is through these that you can, through the appraisal process, that you can help drive your career development. So if you just excuse me for a second whilst I share my slides. Okay, so here we go. So I said, I'm going to talk to you about career development, appraisal, and revalidation. So, becoming a SAS doctor is just the start of your career. It could be one of those kinds of big moments where you think this is it, you're coming up to something, something's happening, and you've done it, you've made it, you've got your job for whatever reason, whether it's a job you wanted or maybe perhaps the job you didn't want it, you're here, you've got your feet under the desk, and that's it. And I'm going to share a little bit of my story, first of all, about what happened to me as an SAS doctor to talk about through this, because I think my story is not untypical, and it explains how I got involved basically in SAS issues and ended up rather accidentally chair of the SAS committee here at the association. So I was in my hospital as an ST3. I'd been sent there because it was identified that I was struggling at one of the bigger hospitals for various reasons in the region, and it was felt that a smaller hospital might be the most suitable place for me. And whilst I was there, I was really thoroughly enjoying the clinical work, but it was very clear that I wasn't going to progress onto the next level training-wise through my ARCP. And I was a bit in a muddle. I didn't really know what to do. I wasn't quite sure where my career was going. And thanks to some a great mentor I had, some great support I had, the SAS role was introduced to me as a way initially of thinking a bit of breathing space, a bit of time, and a SAS job happened to be coming up at the trust where I was at. And I thought, why not? Let's take it for a couple of years and let's see where my career goes. And when I got there, the first feeling, I have to be honest, was a huge feeling of relief, because what felt like the ever continuing treadmill of being a trainee was over. I didn't have a big moment of a sort of ARCP or an exam or something on the deadline, some deadline on the horizon I had to pass there. I didn't have to worry about moving trusts every 6 months or every 12 months. I didn't have to worry about a new place. I had I had a list, I had a rota, I knew where I was, and I knew where things were going for the future. I could make plans for more than a year ahead because I knew where I was. And as we said, that clinically, it was a huge pressure just to be able to concentrate at first on the clinical work and make me realize how much I really enjoyed my work as an anaesthetist and how much I enjoyed anesthesia. But at the same time, there were lots of stuff I didn't really quite understand as a SAS doctor. Suddenly, I didn't have to go on any training. I didn't have a regional teaching program like I had as a trainee. I didn't have a big exam looming over me anymore that I had to pass. But what I did have was hearing people talking about CPD and the need to get CPD points, which I didn't really know what they were or how to get them. I also discovered that I had a rather, well, what seemed to me at the time to be a rather large study budget. And when I asked what I was meant to spend it on, the answer was simple: whatever you want to spend it on. What do you fancy doing at these points? And it was a bit like, well, this is a bit different, isn't it? So at the time, I sort of plodded on doing what I was doing, and a few emails came my way, kept an eye on departmental emails, and I went to do I used some of my money to update my ALS course and do some EPLS because I hadn't done any resus courses for a while. So I went on those, and when I went on those, the resus lead said, oh, we're looking for more people to become instructors. Might you be interested in that? And I was recommended for an instructor status at the end of my ALS course, and I was able to use some of my study leave budget to go on the GIC generic instructors course and become an instructor. And I enjoyed doing that. I worked in my trust, and then suddenly, a few months later, the trust was looking for a representative from the anaesthetic department to join the resus committee to talk about resus. And of course, they turned to me because they said, oh, you've just become an instructor, you're from the anaesthetic department, why don't you join that? So that's where I started picking up a bit of an interest in some committee work and an interest in, at that point, being on the resus committee. I also used my study leave budget to get up to date with some areas of anaesthetics that perhaps I hadn't done as much to training or felt I was a bit struggling with. So I went on some ultrasound guided courses. I went on some airway courses to keep refreshing my airway skills, particularly for my emergency airway skills, as I was becoming acutely aware that I was the most senior doctor in the hospital at night, and I certainly didn't feel it many of the time. So I did that. I then started getting involved in more sort of generic SAS politics and SAS issues, because I suddenly felt that, although it was great being this, I was enjoying my new role, there were aspects of the SAS role that weren't as good as they could be, particularly the voice that SAS doctors had, and not necessarily being listened to, or not, our voice is not counting. And a friend of mine, another SAS doctor, was retiring. His place on the LNC was therefore coming up. So I stood for the LNC, and mainly because no one else was interested in doing it, I was elected to the role unopposed. And I got involved in the LNC, and I started opening a whole new world of talking to NHS managers, people, a language I didn't understand. I had to learn from that. I went on some leadership courses through the BMA as a result of that, which taught me an awful lot about negotiation, leadership skills, management skills, and so on. It's one of these ways that doors open. I happened to be on the LNC, and one of the managers there was also the appraisal lead, and they said to me, we're looking for some more appraisers, and we particularly don't have any SAS appraisers in our trust. Would you be interested in? And I thought, well, why not? Something to do. So I became an appraiser, mainly because I'm one of the world's biggest nosiest people and the huge gossipers, people who know me, and I love finding out and talking to people. I love chatting to my colleagues, and I thought being an appraiser would be a great fun chance to basically chat to people about interesting jobs. And so you can see how one thing led to another, perhaps not rather organically, perhaps not with so much plan, but it soon became clear to me that one needs to do, for various reasons, that it was essential to keep up to date, but that one needs to do more than just turn up, give profile and see the fluorine to keep one's interest in one's job. And whether that was learning new clinical skills or taking on new areas of clinical responsibility, or perhaps getting involved in the areas of work when you've been there for a while, we thought, I think we could do this list a bit better, or we could do something here. Opportunities tend to present themselves, and I'll come on to this. And that's basically how completely accidentally a person like myself, who would work in a small DGH, whose training career had not been terribly stellar, to put it least, ended up on the SAS Committee Association, and then a couple of years later ended up chairing it and on the council. So I suppose the first thing I'd say is that anyone can, if I can develop my career, well, just about anybody can. So being a SAS doctor is the start of your journey. It's certainly not the finish. All of us is essential to keep up to date. It's essential to keep up to date to maintain good medical practice, to keep up to date with developments in our specialty, but also I think it's more essential to keep our professional curiosity going, because we don't want to become jaded or bored or cynical. And by learning new skills or taking on new areas of practice or different areas of practice, it's how we keep our interest going in the job. I have a colleague who's just clinically always interested in how can he improve his performance, how can he make things better. And that's such a fabulous road. You just approach every list of how can I do this better. So you may well have heard about appraisal revalidation negatively. People really, they hear so many negative points about revalidation and the roles of it and the hoops to jump through. But I'm going to say about how I think appraisal can actually help you with your career development and why I personally, and I'll be biased because I'm an appraiser, think appraisal is a fantastic thing. So why develop? We've talked about this. It's to keep up to date, it's to get on additional roles. It also may help you improve your CV. That might be to take on another specialist, a specialty doctor post elsewhere. It might be to apply for a specialist post, a new senior SAS role that replaces the old AS grade. It might be for doing CSER to return to get onto a specialist register and improve your CV for consultant post. It may be to help with applying for re-entering training. But obviously anything additional you do is going to help your CV in so many ways, which will be beneficial. It might help with taking on additional roles you're interested in the future in your department. So hopefully you'll understand why I think that developing a career is a brilliant idea and why we should always be moving forward rather than standing still. So what is revalidation? It'll be one of those things we hear all about it. It's a GMC process. It's absolutely mandatory for us to maintain our licenses. You need to revalidate every 5 years. You revalidate through your designated body. That is usually your main employer. It's slightly more complicated if you have more than one employer, or if you have working for a locum agency, or you have a sort of multiple jobs going around. But generally, for the vast majority of us SAS doctors, your designated body will be the NHS trust you work for. And that trust will have a responsible officer. The responsible officer, often the medical director in a trust, but not always, will be the person who basically makes the recommendation to the GMC as to whether to revalidate you or whether your revalidation should be deferred. Usually deferral is a very neutral act, and the vast majority of people who defer is because they need another year to gather the evidence because they've either been on maternity leave or they've been on ill health or another reason has prevented them from gathering it. But obviously what you don't want to have is what's called non-engagement in the process. The worst thing you can do is to not engage. So if you're struggling to revalidate, not sure what you're doing, don't bury your head in the sand. That's my one approach. Speak to people, get help. Basically, speak to other people. Speak to your responsible officer. Your trust will have an appraisal lead. That may be the responsible officer. It may be somebody else. They will almost certainly have an admin person from the HR department who assists with this. But the basic principles to revalidations, the way the GMC said there are no concerns about your practice and they are happy for you to remain with a license and carry on practicing. It needs to cover the whole scope of your practice. So, I mean, that's easy when you just work for one employer as your NHS trust. But maybe you do some other roles. Maybe you've got a voluntary role, you've got a role in the independent sector, you're the doctor for a local sporting team, whatever. So it needs to cover that to show there are no concerns in those areas as well. And the basics of it are, it's a record of the responsible officer will make a recommendation based on record of appraisals, the appraisals you have for your appraisee over the last 5 years, and the feedback you take from your colleague and your colleagues and patients' feedback. It is your responsibility to sort your revalidation out. If you don't do it, no one's going to come chasing you. But if you don't do it, the consequences are really quite serious. So it's very important. If you're not sure what you're doing, find out. So if you're new to a SAS role, as a trainee, you won't have had to worry about all this because effectively your designated body is local HEE and the responsible officer will be the training program director, and it happens through your ARCP process. So suddenly you've got to do this in this role. And if you're not sure what to do, I'd urge you very quickly in your role to make contact with your appraisal lead, to make contact with your responsible officer and with the appraisal administrator in your trust. And they are a wealth of knowledge to help you with the practicalities, such as logins for different IT systems, because obviously inevitably in the NHS, everyone uses different systems, but also will help you because, let's say, the worst thing you do is to not engage. So as I said, the main thing based on the validation is the record of your appraisal. So what is appraisal? Well, the first thing to mention is appraisal is very different from what you may have done as a trainee as an ARCP, and it's very different from performance managing. It is not your boss coming in and telling you how you're doing it, which I think is how it's often perceived by people. It's very different. It's not a summative. It's not a pass-fail. There's no, I passed my appraisal or I didn't pass my appraisal. It's a process and it's reflective. And I think the best thing I can put in it is that the way we do it is important. Filling in the forms is important, but it's not a box ticking exercise. It's the way we reflect upon doing it. And when I'm doing it, both writing my own appraisal, but when I'm appraising another doctor, the two thoughts going through my head is, am I a good doctor? Is my performance adequate? How do I know it is? And how do I ensure I keep at that level? Those are the questions I'm asking myself, or I'm asking the person I'm appraising. How do they think they're doing? What do they think are the challenges? And it's helping them come up with the answers themselves of well, actually, here's what I think I'm doing, here's what I think the challenges are, and here's my program going forward. It's reflective. You reflect on the learning. What have you learned on it? What have you done over the last year? How are you going to help it going forward? And from that, you develop a PDP, a development program, personal development program. And it's really important to develop the PDP because although it's not mandatory, your PDP carries great weight because your responsible officer gets that. And at your appraisal next year, there'll be a discussion about what's happened with your PDP, how much have you done it, what have you done, what's been the challenges, if you haven't achieved things, why not? And so if you have a burning desire or some way you'd like to develop your career, discussing with your appraiser and putting it into your PDP is a fantastic way of helping advance it forward because it carries such weight. It'll be in your responsible officer will read it, your appraiser will see it, and it'll be a question of, well, if you're not getting it, why not? And what can we do and what can you do to help get it? In many places, you'll discover that your study leave budget may well be linked to your PDP, so that if you wish to go on something and it's not on your PDP, you may struggle to get study leave funding for it, because not unreasonably your employer will say, well, you've not shown any interest in this, why are you suddenly interested in going on X course? So I think the PDP, the appraisal, is a brilliant way. It's almost in some ways like the confessional. It's a safe space, it's confidential for you and your appraiser to talk about, look back over the year and look forward, where are you going? And effectively the question of where are you, where do you want to be, and how are you going to get there, and what do you need to support you with that? So I think appraisal, if approached in the right way and not the wrong way of being told what to do, could be a very powerful tool in helping you to develop your career. Usually you choose your appraiser. There may be very limited circumstances where for whatever reason the responsible officer will suggest an appraiser you have to have, but usually it's a mutual choice between you and your appraiser. It is not forced upon you, so it does not have to be your manager. It does not even have to be from your specialty. Many people, I think there's great benefit in both appraising and being appraised from outside your specialty because they bring a fresh pair of eyes and a fresh way of looking at it. But it's not to be approached with fear, but I think appraisal should be something to look forward to, of like, where would I like to get from my career? And it's a good chance to take stock yourself of your year or so going forward. So a major part of your appraisal is your continuing professional development in your CPD, and you absolutely must be getting time and support for your CPD. So obviously that's your study leave budget, and it's your study leave time, and it's also the time in your job plan for SPA. And Reshma is going to talk more about the contractual issues, but the absolute bare minimum in a SAS contract is that you should be getting an absolute minimum of 1 SPA time. So 4 hours a week for your own self-directed learning and study and keeping up to date, keeping your basic appraisal, keeping yourself appraised and revalidated, doing these things. So it's really important. If you're not getting that, speak to your LNC, speak to your manager, speak to a wise colleague you trust or whatever, because that's a real basic contractual necessity. It doesn't happen always, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be happening. So what is CPD? Well, it's learning, but mostly it's reflecting on it. What have I learned and how's it going to change it? It can be formal, it can be going on conferences, going on courses. So you might look at your PDP and think, right, I'm taking up a new role. I'm finding myself anesthetizing more and more for this procedure in orthopedics, for example, but my regional skills are perhaps a little bit rustier than I'd like them to be. So therefore, I'd like to go on a formal regional ultrasound cadaver course, for example. But it can be informal learning. It's your reading, it's your studying, it's your listening, even the chats with colleagues. How would you anesthetize this? How would you do that? What would you do about this? That in itself is still learning, because the important thing is not that you do it, that you reflect on it. People often talk, you'll hear people talking about in CPD points and how many points we got, how many points you need. That's a bit of a misnomer. There is no requirement for a set number of points of CPD. Or when I'm appraising someone, I'm much more interested in what they've done than the pure point counting. I'm much more interested in what they've done, CPD, and what they've learned from it and how it might affect their practice, rather than the fact that, I slept through the back of a lecture and claimed 15 points for it because I was there for 3 days, but none of it had any relevance to my practice. So make sure it's relevant. Other things it might be reflection on audit data. You may collect data in obstetrics. We often follow up the epidurals. How's my success rate with my epidurals? Are my epidurals getting women comfortable? How's it compared to the departmental average? How is it better? Is it worse? If it's not as good as it could be, why not? What might I do about this? Some places collect data on anesthetics outcomes on post-op nausea and vomiting. pain recovery. They might look at you might look at audit yourself, your block, maybe your block conversion rates, how many of your blocks, regional blocks, you had to convert to general anaesthetic. It might be more formal things such as training courses, identifying a specific learning need or a development need. Either here's something I need to do more of, or here's something that I think I'd like to do more of to take my career forward. And that's exactly where putting the PDP comes into it. It might be using specialty resources, online resources. It might be shadowing another colleague. It might be secondment. The SAS tutor in your trust is a fantastic point of contact for these, because they will often have lots of resources about courses. They will often organise generic training courses for all the SAS doctors in the trust, but they will also have contacts and links of people. There's the SAS Development Fund, which was money ring-fenced from the 2008 contract specifically for SAS doctor training. Different regions and different trusts do it different ways. In some places, it's held by the central HEE. Some places, it's at trust level. Some use it to help support individual doctors. Some use it to put on generic courses for their SAS doctors as a whole. But certainly, speak to your SAS tutor, talk about SAS development funding, particularly if there's areas of development that you feel you need to do and would need some support in terms of resources. There are options available through there. And then there should equally be your study leave. So you should be getting a minimum of 10 days, 30 years over 3 years of study leave. Study budgets are not contractual, but you absolutely should be making sure you get the same as your consultant colleagues in terms of study budget. And if you're not, again, speak to your LNC about why not and getting that on the radar. So that's a little bit about CPD. CPD is our learning, it's what drives our development and what takes our career further forward, keeping our skills updated and learning new skills. Autonomous practice is something you might have heard about career development. It's a rather nebulous concept, and it's one of those concepts that you hear talked about. What's it actually mean? Traditionally, I suppose it's meant whose name is above the bed. You know, this is Mr. X's patient or Dr. Y's patient. And you think maybe it doesn't really apply to us in anaesthetics as much because we don't have our own patients, they already belong to someone else. But it's actually a much more complicated factor than that. It's about, are you working independently? Are you working under supervision? Early on in your career as a SAS doctor, you may well be working under supervision. You almost certainly will be. That's not the same as direct supervision, having a consultant in the room with you, because obviously you won't be doing that for a lonely list, especially out of hours. But it means that there's someone there for backup, someone to call there. All of us, whatever stage of our career are, we call on our friends and our colleagues for help and support, and all of us need to know where our help is. So it's a more concept of, are you working independently? Do you have ownership of this list? Is it the sort of thing that you just, are trusted by yourselves to get on with and do it yourselves? And it's something that you often discuss with your clinical lead, again, often through the appraisal process, about working autonomously. And there's no reason why SAS doctors cannot be working autonomously in the areas of which they are deemed competent to practice in. There are no barriers to it. There are many SAS doctors are working autonomously but not being recognised to it. But the BMA and AR Academy of Medical Royal College has developed guidance about autonomous working. And if you think you're working autonomously, or it may well be your goal to work towards using your PDP, how do I become an autonomous practitioner in whatever field? It's not all or nothing. There's absolutely no way I could be an autonomous practitioner in cardiac or neuro anaesthetics or even vascular, which we do in my trust, because I just don't do it. I do it very little. But I am recognised as an autonomous practitioner in most of my other areas, in obstetrics, in orthopaedic anaesthesia, in plastics, and some of the ENT work. So it's specific to your practice, and it's partly a matter of professional pride. It is my anaesthetic. I would like my name to be recorded on it. I don't want a situation in the past, the previous trust, where myself and a SAS surgeon would operate, but the theatre register would have the name of the on-call consultant surgeon and the on-call consultant anaesthetist. It's my list. I'm taking ownership of it. I'm taking ownership of the complications and the problems. I'm seeking help appropriately with it. Therefore, I would like to be recognised for that. The other benefit for it is that once you're recognised an autonomous practitioner, it may well help with opening other barriers and opening other doors, because it may well help with your application for making a case for being a specialist post when you wish to get to that stage, to show that you're working autonomously. You can work independently at that stage. It may well, if you're looking at doing out of hours work, extra waiting, non-contractual work, picking up extra shifts. There's been all sorts of issues in the past about supervision of SAS doctors out of hours. And if you can recognise that you're working autonomously, then that can help with that. So I would argue that's a very good thing to do to work towards in the future, autonomous practice. And just as we were when we were trainees and our supervision gradually slipped away from being the immediateness of the novice period where the your supervisors are holding your hand to the period where they moved out into the anaesthetic room, then the coffee room, and eventually at home. It's just so our autonomous practice develops as we go on. So that's another area you might want to develop your practice in. Extended roles. This is something that many SAS doctors take on, and I've taken on many additional roles. And the SAS Charter is very clear that all these roles should be opened and advertised to SAS doctors. And there's no reason why SAS doctors can't do many of these roles. And I know even with anaesthetics, off the top of my head, I can give examples of appraisers, clinical and educational supervisors. I know of a SAS training program director in a specialty, so resus, ALS, ATLS instructors. People have specialty leads, they're the lead in their trust for a particular area, such as the airway lead or the TIVA lead or whatever. LNCs, including LNC chairs. There are SAS clinical directors in anaesthetics. There are SAS doctors who are the guardian of safe working, and so on. There is absolutely no reason why, if you have an interest in these areas, why you should not be taking them on as extended roles. And as your career develops, once you're starting out, these are sort of things that you should be thinking about doing. How would I like to take my role? And these are the sorts of roles that will absolutely help your CV if you're looking at applying for either consultant post through a CESAR program later on or specialist post later on. But I think it's also important, it's absolutely right, that all these roles require the appropriate time and resources, just like the consultant colleagues do. You can't do these roles in your own time. If you're only getting the one SPA, how are you going to fit that? That's taken up by your own appraisal revalidation. Where are you going to fit the time in to be an educational supervisor into that one SPA? It helps that many trusts now have core and additional SPA, so it's much more there. Our tariff is clearer, but a basic principle is something's worth doing, it's worth being paid for and recognised. And if it's not being remunerated or recognised, it probably means that a job is not worth doing. So do look at these, but do make sure you speak to your leads. Don't be so keen to take things on. You do them without the appropriate resources and requirements time. So tips for developing your career. First of all, do give yourself time to settle into your department. It's quite a bewildering time as a SAS doctor. Get your feet starting out, get your feet under the table, find out what's happening in your organisation, in your department, in your trust. Start finding out where your interests lie. What piques your interest? Which bits of anaesthetics you're interested in? Maybe which bits of anaesthetics are finding more challenging you'd like to develop in. Make sure you do join in all departmental meetings. The SAS charters, which are across all 4 nations, are very clear that we are senior permanent members of staff in our departments. We should be fully part of all decisions and management structures. Go to departmental meetings. They may well seem dull as dishwater at the start, but this is where you'll get your voice, make sure your voice is heard, and find out what else is happening and what other roles you might want to take onto, and what piques your interest. This is where you'll hear that they're looking for a new resuscitation lead, or the trust is short of ALS instructors or whatever. Obviously, be realistic with your goals. You're not going to be able to do some kind of multi-centre, multinational, multi-centre, double-blind research trial within 6 months. Be realistic. Think about what you're doing now, where you want to get to. But when you're offered roles, I think to supervisors, say yes, even if you've not been asked. If a job's coming up and doing role and you're interested in it, say, why not me? If you've got a passionate interest in day surgery and your department's looking for a new day surgery lead, ask the question, could I do it? And if the question is no, or the answer is no, or you think you can't do it, think, well, if I'd like to do it, what do I need to become it? What's the resources? What's the support? What do I need to develop? And discuss that in your appraisal, put it into your PDP and develop it. The final tip I would give you, which I say is absolutely essential, is find a mentor. It might be within your trust, it might be outside of your trust. We have the association mentoring scheme available to all of our members. I wouldn't have got anywhere in my SAS career if I hadn't had support of a couple of older, wiser colleagues before I knew about the word mentoring, but they were mentors to me. They supported me, they helped me find my way and navigate through and find out what I want to do, and help me make the role a success and turn it into, from what I thought I was, a failing trainee, to being what I consider to be a vaguely successful SAS doctor. So find a mentor, find support, find help, and use the people for resources you have for help. You'll get these slides through so you can see these on recording. But these are various documents I think are essential to help you with developing your career and with your appraisal. So SAS chart documents, there's a health education and a Academy of Medical Royal College about supporting SAS doctors. There's job planning guidance, particularly for SAS doctors, and there's the information about the autonomous practice. So these will all be up in the slides. Use these resources, use your colleagues, use the association, use the links network, use your to feed things through the SAS committee, look at all the courses the association offers, think about where you want to get with your career, think about how you might get there, and I wish you all the best of luck in that. Thank you very much. Sorry for getting my webcam back up. So for my next talk, I would like to introduce Dr. Reshma Kopar, who is another of my former colleagues from the SAS committee at the Association Anaesthetists, and she's an associate specialist in anaesthetics at the Royal Berks Hospital in Reading. And she's worked in India before coming to the UK and understands SAS issues really quite in depth through her work on the LNC and the Reading Royal Berks and on the SAS committee. She's been a member representative on the Wellbeing Party, Equality, Diversity, Inclusive Task Group Association, and through the BMA, she's secretary for the Regional SAS Committee and the Regional Council, as well as being the rep on her local negotiating committee. So she's going to talk to us about the contractual issues of an SAS, being an SAS doctor. And again, questions, please put questions in the chat box, and we'll talk about these things at the end. So thank you very much, Reshma, and thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you, Tom. Are my slides seen? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I can see your slide.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Thank you. So I'm going to give an overview of the different contracts. Talking about the contractual issues. We would need to know why these contractual issues are important. It seems like these issues can have a significant effect on doctors' motivation, well-being, which could affect their retention and productivity. So, being a LNC representative, I have seen this happening in practice, that the well-being issues are, when they are resolved, their well-being is improved. So coming to there are various contracts, and these contracts slightly vary in England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Now we know that in 2008 SAS contract, many SAS anesthetists were regraded to associate specialist grade. And then in the 2008 contract, there were associate specialists and the specialty doctor contract. What happened? Some doctors, staff grade doctors, still remained on the pre-2008 contract as well. So there are a number of contracts. After this 2008 contract, the main point which was disappointing for the specialty doctor and staff grade doctors was that the progression, the opportunity to progression to associate specialist and career progress this grade was closed. Further to that, in 2021, we know that in SAS contract in April 2021, the specialty doctor contract and the specialist contract was updated. So this was this was not as simple as regrading. Regrading was a simpler procedure to go to the associate specialist, progress to associate specialist group. But still, it opened the opportunity for the specialty doctors to progress to the specialist contract, and also for the staff grades if they are on the pre-2008 contract. In this contract, there is an option to stay either on the 2008 contract or to move to the 2021 contract. Now, all these contracts, I have sent the documents of contracts and recent updated pay scales to Andrew, and all SS anesthetists who are attending this webinar will be sent all the updated copies. So with this diverse group of doctors, there are also locally employed doctors who are on local terms and conditions. Now, with the recent GMC review as well, it is recognized, it is found that locally employed doctors with local terms and conditions, number of these doctors is increasing. And it is expected that in about 2030, SAS doctors are going to be maybe a biggest group as a professional group in the NHS. So locally employed doctors could be on name like trust grade doctors, they could be named as fellow doctors. It became a little bit more complicated when they close the grade of associate specialist on the national terms and conditions. Some of the specialty doctors were upgraded by the trust to the locally employed associate specialists. So technically they are also on the local contract. So this makes it bit more a variety of contracts in the SAS grade. The good thing about which was achieved, a very good negotiation was achieved by the joint negotiating SAS committee. That was that initially there was a deadline given, which was 30th September 2021, to move to the new SAS contract. This deadline was not very much welcome by SS doctors, because some of the SS doctors would rather wanted to move after a few years when it is financially better for them to move to this contract. But initial deadline was abolished, which was a landmark development. I would say this is a very important development for specialty doctors and staff grade doctors, because, or even for all doctors, associate specialists as well, this decision gives doctors the flexibility to switch to the new contract once they feel that doing so, switching to the new contract would be most financially beneficial for them. Because the associate specialist grade, the 2008 contract, the pay scale is higher than the specialist contract. So this quite a few have decided not to move to the new contract. So it can be confusing for SS doctors to see which option works best for them and when. So the important thing is to look at our pay scale, or if someone going for a job interview, the latest pay slip should be there to see that, as we all know, but sometimes we could forget, because this is a very important to know which salary scale is being given, or the SS doctor is accepting which salary pay scale in the new job or switching to the new contract. The other considerations are also about job plan, full-time, part-time job. So this is a very, I mean, people know, but I'm sure it says doctors know, but it's very important to have this BMA employment advice, which is available for BMA members. And this is the number. The opening hours, they are open till 8 p.m. on weekdays, and they are also open on Saturdays, half day. This slide show the links to the pay and contract, and also to the latest pay scales. I'll come back to that to talk about some topical issues about the latest pay scales and also the extra contractual rate card, which is also a quite topical issue at the moment. I'll come back to that. So about the local negotiating committee. So what is the role of local negotiating committee LNC in this SAS contract? If there are any contractual issues, it is I would definitely better to have a discussion with the BMA employment advisor, because if by calling the number which was shown on the previous screen, because they will give you the employment advice. But again, the local negotiating committee, this LNC reps will have good contractual understanding, and they are the one to approach, and any concerns are also to be conveyed to the BMA IRO, Industrial Relation Officer, through the LNC rep. Now, BMA IROs tell us that LNC will discuss about the collective issues, about the all doctors of issues in general, and they may not discuss about any any issues affecting just single doctors. But in our trust, or I have seen, I was involved in when somebody's well-being gets significantly affected, and these are the issues which are generally become general issues. So it varies. The support from the LNC rep you should be able to receive support from the LNC rep about any contractual issues, and also to speak to the BMA advisor, and these issues may be about the pay scale, the rota, the contract. It is always better, preferable, to have a clear understanding and agreement about what pay scale is. The pay scale is appropriate to the previous salary, is the pay scale appropriate to the level of experience that the SS doctor has. It is important, it is useful to do it before. Otherwise, there is a process where doctors can apply through the appeal process and then go through the grievance procedure. And I had accompanied them for the appeal process, and there was a successful outcome. But it is not easy, that process. It is always better and it is always easier to do these things before the experience, evidence of experience. In that doctor's case, he had not provided the experience, and he had not provided that what was his previous pay scale. So all this could have been done before. As we all know, this is just a quick discussion about the direct in the job plan. LNC will also look at if there is, what are the issues, if the direct clinical care, if anybody is getting supporting professional activities, SPA, the minimum SPA per week, 4 hours minimum, everyone should get for appraisal and revalidation. In some trusts, local negotiating committee have agreed to 1.25 or 1.5 SPAs as well. In our job planning policy, I was there for we had agreed for SS doctors to get 1.25. It says 1.5, but we are giving in our trust 1.25 to 1.5 SPAs. But anybody should get at least one SPA, which is important. The other considerations, as Tom has already discussed, but this is about it's important to check the contract for how much annual leave, study leave, and the study leave funding, whether it's there. written in the contract. Annual leave, apart from after 7 years of work in the trust as SS doctor or in the trust, additional annual leave of, as per the contract, 1 day, but in some trusts, including ours, it's 2 days. We have worked very hard on the LNC on that to get the 2 days. So our trust has kept the 2 days. And but minimum 1 day should be, all SS doctors should be getting after 7 years of service in the trust. Study leave, generally it is 30 days over 3 years. Again, that is important to check that your local contracts, though it would vary, it should still, they have got revalidation and appraisal requirements are there for everyone. So if it is not there, then it should be pointed out. Then the study leave funding. The study leave funding by the trust, it may vary, but it's about £800 per year, and that also it's good to check whether that is mentioned in your contract. SAS doctors also have got funding available for the SAS funding, which comes from the Health Education England on top of this study leave funding by the trust. The other things which are like traveling expenses, which come traveling between 2 sites, and also the relocation expenses are also mentioned in the SAS contract. So you will be getting all the contracts, and please, it would be useful to go through the relocation expenses where the doctors are moving their houses, and also relocation expenses are also should be received. So coming back to a few topical things. One is, we know that the opportunity for a specialist grade is there. The minimum criteria are full registration, license to practice with the GMC, a minimum of 12 years medical work, continuous, which could be in the continuous period or in aggregate, since obtaining the primary medical qualification, a minimum of 6 years of which in the specialty, the relevant specialty experience. In the specialty grade, a doctor or is in the equivalent grade or above. And the doctor should meet the criteria set out in the specialist grade generic framework. So for that, it is good to have the portfolio as what Tom has already gone through all that. Now about the latest pay scale, which I have sent through, you will receive it after the webinar, all the latest pay scale, including the 2022 pay scale. Now this 2022 pay scale is published on 24th August this year. And this is following the recent DDRB announced the report. So DDRB is the body on doctors and dentists remuneration, and they published the 50th report recently in August. So according to that, they have given the 4.5% increase to the national pay scale, and that is going to be backdated, supposed to be backdated from 1st April this year. This applies to SS doctors in on the 2008 contract. It is they are saying that this is not applicable to the 2021 contract. I think they are they are being given 2% pay rise. The reason they have given is the 2021 contract has got multiple year pay deal. So but BMA and the SS committee is from the BMA is working on that all of these doctors should get, all doctors should get this 4.5% rise. But at the moment, it is for the 2008 contract. So those who are on the 2008 contract, they should follow with their salary wages department, and if they do not receive the backdated pay, then they should approach the LNC representative. So this is the doctors are, BMA is not happy with just 4.5% pay increase, because in the context of rising inflation, this is actually likely to represent like almost a 6% pay cut. But at the same time, doctors are not happy that some doctors are not included in this, if everybody should have been included in this 4.5% one. So that is one of the things. The other important issue, the current issue, is the extra contractual SAS rate card. So in our trust, I had asked for the management to look at these to make them aware of this rate card, so as to implement that. I received a reply that they are working on it, but they will come back to it about that, and it will be a process. But the rate card, the principle about this is that there is a wide variation around the country in the amount paid for the extra contractual work. We are talking about extra contractual work which is above the job plan, and in order to achieve uniformity, fairness and consistency, BMA has published a minimum rate card, has designed it. Now the rates which are recommended there are, they have given a timeline as well, from 15 September to 30th November 2022. And this is because the inflation can vary, and so with other factors. So that is why the timeline is there. So what they are saying is weekly, depends upon the weekly rate, whether they are on the work, the extra contractual work is being done on the weekday or on the weekend, and whether it is date between say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The autonomous rates have been asked for up to 150 per hour, and weekdays about 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. is 200 per hour, weekend is 200 per hour, and overnight is 250 per hour. This is for the autonomous work. For the supervised work, which might apply on the rota, if somebody is providing the second on-call cover or first on-call cover or third on-call cover, that will apply as a supervised cover, and those rates are Monday to on weekdays between 7 and 7 p.m. 85 per hour, weekday is 110 per hour, between in the evening between 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Weekend is 110 per hour between 7 and 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. and overnight it will be 150 per hour. So now the trust will, then we have to see that what negotiation, how it will get negotiated at the trust level. So LNC reps should work hard on this. So this is very recently published, and it's still we have our trust hasn't come back to us, so we'll see. We're still waiting. I think because I have sent so much other information in lots of 6-7 attachments, I'll wait for the questions because it's a very big topic of contractual issues. The main thing is just to be vigilant before we accept the contract, which contract we are accept. Are we okay, happy with the contract? At earlier stages, it is very easier to involve the LNC rep or the BMA advisor and to get the right salary scale and the study level, get the contract which you could agree on. If there are still issues, then there is a process, and then it is better to get involved in the process and resolve the issue rather than affecting one's well-being and everything. So anyway, I think it is helpful. Thank you. I'm giving my email, and if there are any questions or things that there are any issues or you want to discuss, you could please write to me. And I don't mind us answering the questions in the question answer session. Thank you and best wishes.
Thank you very much, Reshma. Thank you for that brilliant run through of the contractual issues and some of the factors that affect all of us as SAS doctors, but perhaps we don't realise when we start. So the next thing we're going to talk about in our session is perhaps some of the alternative routes you might take on to become a SAS doctor. The vast majority of us as SAS doctors wish to remain SAS doctors and develop our careers within the SAS grade, but for some people, the appropriate thing or what they wish to do is to move into maybe two of the other routes outside that. So we've got two speakers who are going to talk to us about some of the alternative routes. First of all, we have Sabrina Butcher. Sabrina is a ST6 trainee in the Northeast, currently undertaking her advanced module in regional anaesthesia and looking towards a consultant post in cardiothoracic anaesthesia. Sabrina worked as a SAS doctor for 2.5 years, taking time out of training before returning to training program, and was a member of our SAS committee during that period. And we also have Kirstin May, who's been a SAS anaesthetist for almost 20 years, working in the Oxford University Hospital. She's been a council member of the Royal College of Anaesthetists, and she's actually the previous member of the CSER assessment committee at the Royal College. She's now a member of our association SAS committee, and she's going to talk about the alternative route, a very, very brief overview of CSER and the route we're getting on the specialist register for a SAS post. In itself, it is worthy of a topic or even a day of its own, but these two are going to give you a quick mention of perhaps to get your interest in some of the alternative routes from the SAS career. So thank you very much for speaking to us, and we'll hear from Sabrina first.
Thank you very much, Tom. So I will very quickly go through some kind of pathways in terms of going back into training if that's a route that you decide that you want to do. So I'll quickly go through SAS or training, the pathway and entry, portfolio building and how it's scored, and then a brief bit on interviews. I suppose for me, I did 2.5 years as a staff grade, and I enjoyed my time immensely. And I think there are a number of things which need to be considered as to whether you want to remain in that role or go into a training position. For me, lifestyle was a big thing. I felt like I was treated as an adult as an SAS doctor. I had autonomy for some of my own lists and was involved far more within the department. I was seen as a permanent member of staff and was treated in that way. Whereas as a trainee, I think you do rotate round and perhaps you're not regarded in quite the same way in that respect as a doctor. As an SAS doctor, most people will be working in one hospital and therefore they will know what commute that they have to do and have decided that that is an acceptable part of their day-to-day working pattern. When you go into training, obviously you will work within a specific region and there will be travel involved to go to different hospitals to be able to go and do different specialist areas. So that is something which does need to be taken into consideration. Rotas, depending on how you work in your own hospitals. You may be part of an on-call rota with trainees anyway. For me, I had a rota which was very much designed for me, which meant that I had days off when I needed them and could organise my life around that, and worked very nicely. As a trainee, you do have a rota which is published for you. You are supposed to get those 6 to 8 weeks in advance, although that does not always happen. And you don't really have any say on where you are placed within that rota. Exams are unfortunately something that does come up in training, both to get into the training pathway and also as part of training. They're also something that you may wish to do as an SAS doctor just to achieve that yourself, but it is an essential component if you decide to go into training. Day-to-day workload for me was one of the factors that was key for me going into training. I wanted to be able to have a bigger repertoire of things I could do. I wanted to be able to work with other people and see how other people gave anaesthetics and be able to increase my knowledge and my skill set in a way that I didn't feel I was able to do in the role I was as an SAS doctor. I was very comfortable in the anaesthetics I was giving, but I wasn't able to expand and develop my skills, and particularly in more specialist areas such as neurosurgery and cardiothoracic anaesthesia, or more advanced paediatrics. So they are things that you do have the opportunity to be able to explore and try that you may not have a chance to within an SAS role. Other thing is, what is your end goal? Where do you want to be 10 years down the line? Do you wish to be a consultant, or are you quite happy working where you are within an SAS role and developing that in the ways that Tom has talked about earlier, because it can be a very fulfilling role to be able to do. In terms of training pathway, this on the left-hand side is what they would like us to be able to do. So you register with the GMC, you do 2 years as a foundation doctor, enter specialty training, do your stage 1 of anaesthetics, enter high specialty training, stage 2, and following that round, you get your CCT and become a consultant. For the majority of people within an SAS role, you will be entering at this point here. So you will be entering for a stage 2. The training system changed in 2021, so that stage 1 now encompasses 3 years from CT1 to CT3, and stage 2, which is where you would be entering, is 2 years followed by a further 2 at stage 3. The total length of training has not changed, but they've just changed the progression points. Instead of being at 2 years at kind of the stage 1 and 3 at stage 2. In terms of entry to this, I suspect that the majority, there's 5 different ways you can enter. I suspect that the majority of people will either be in this top one here, where they've got all required learning outcomes for stage 1, but they're not in a UK core training post with a national training number, or they'll be within this one at the very bottom, where they've not completed UK or anaesthetic training on either the previous 2010 curriculum or the current 2021 curriculum. And for both of those, you will need a stage 1 equivalent certificate in order to apply for that. That is what the certificate looks like on the right-hand side here. It is a document that needs to be signed by either your local regional advisor or the deputy regional advisor. They are people that, if you look on the Royal College of Association website, they will provide a list of regional advisors and the hospitals in which they work. They have not provided email addresses or phone numbers because of data protection, but the advice on the website is that if you phone the hospital, you can either speak to a secretary or speak directly with them and ask them to be able to sign this for you. There's no specific guidance on what evidence that is required in order to have this signed off, but this is a list of the evidence that is suggested. And it's basically evidence that you would need to have if you were a core trainee with a national training number, progressing through your stage 1 competencies and looking to apply for stage 2. So you'd have your initial assessment of competence certificate, your initial assessment of competence in obstetric anaesthesia, sign off for your stage 1 domains of learning. As a trainee, you'll have probably had an ARCP. As an SAS doctor, Again, talking about reviews, this is where looking at your annual reviews would come into play and showing that you are progressing through that. One of the key changes in where they've changed the timing is that you do need to make sure that you have passed both parts of the primary FRCA to be eligible to apply for stage 2. If you haven't passed it, then you won't get through the shortlisting process, so there's not a lot of point. You do need to make sure you've passed that. They will probably want to have an outline CV and have expressed support of your college tutor in you moving from an SAS position into training. So recruitment for anaesthetics is done nationally, so you don't apply locally anymore, and it's done by ANRO, which is the Anaesthetics National Recruitment Office. I've put the website on there and that will be available to you. Within that website, you have a load of information, including person specification for the job, indicative vacancy information, so you can see how many jobs are coming up. They have jobs advertised for August and for February. There are usually a lot more jobs in August than for February, but it will give you an idea of how many numbers. It will also tell you what the competition ratios have been in the past, some guidance on application, and then links to individual specialty recruitment pages. This is the first page that you will see when you click on that website. And what you'll be able to see is for people applying to this, you can click on the ST4 button here or the February 2003 button. Both of those will give you lots of information about application and person specifications for that. If you click on the how to apply, then what you'll find is that this comes up and you can click on each of these individual boxes to give more specific information as to each part process. All of the application is done via an online form, and that is currently open for the next round of recruitment, and it's on the Oriel website. What I would recommend, and from experience, is that this is quite a tedious form to fill in. There's an awful lot of information that can be pre-populated, so a lot of personal details, qualifications, etc. can all be pre-populated on it, and I would advise that you do that in advance and you give yourself enough time to be able to fill this in, because it's not something you can do in an evening. It does take quite a lot of time and a lot of thought in order to be able to fill it out correctly. The other thing is that it's quite useful to be able to do this with a person specification, which you will also find on that website. When they have certain questions within that, it's helpful to go back and look at what criteria they're looking at and relate it to that and give examples so that you're showing that information for people. What you'll find on the form, and this is just what I've done, is just taken a little screenshot of one of the sections that they look at, is that they will have essential and desirable criteria. If you don't meet the essential criteria, your application will be rejected at the shortlisting process. Ideally, you want to have some of the components within the desirable criteria to make you more likely to be able to get shortlisted. On the right-hand side, it gives you an example of where that is going to be evaluated. So you can see for this example that it will be evaluated at the application form, and therefore, if you haven't got things on the essential list, then that will be rejected at that time. Portfolio scoring is one of the components that I think people have struggled with in the past. There are 11 separate components within the portfolio scoring system, and I apologise for how busy it looks on the right-hand side. What you'll find is that they will ask you to go through the 11 different sections and award yourself a score based on the experience that you have. That score has been used to determine who will be shortlisted for interview and who doesn't. For the round of interviews in February, actually everybody got an interview, but previously people have not been successful at getting an interview because of their scoring on the portfolio. What I will highlight is that they will ask you to provide evidence for whatever score you have given yourself. So if you say that you have published something, or you've had a poster presentation, or you do activities outside, such as we have here, they will want evidence of that. When they talk about presentations, they do not want the presentation sent to them, what they want is evidence of you having given that presentation. And if you can't provide that, then when they go through, you won't get those scores. Interview structure is going to be a little bit difficult to predict. Obviously, with COVID, they used to be face-to-face and interviews have gone online. Certainly the last round of interviews, they were all online. They are hoping to make them face-to-face in the future, but I don't know whether that is going to take place in August or whether that will be for the next February. You have 2 different parts to it. If it's face-to-face, it's 3. You have a clinical interview where you are given clinical information. You're asked to read and digest that before, and then you go in and have an interview. They will talk to you about that clinical problem, and within that, they will assess your reflection, your clinical ability to look at problems and find solutions, your team working ability, and they will push you on different components within that to decide how you're going to behave and whether you're going to be safe to be somebody who will be left on call, because that's essentially the role that they are looking for you to be when you take up that role. There will also be a general interview. If it's in person, they will quite often go through your portfolio and you need the evidence with you in a folder in front of you. They will talk to you about reflective practice and go through your portfolio. If you've talked about having done audits, then they may ask you about the audits and ask you to give information about them and delve into a little bit deeper. Face-to-face interviews also included a presentation section where you were given 10 minutes to prepare a presentation on a topic that they had selected and then present that to the group. And you were assessed on your ability to prepare a presentation rather than the content of what it was actually on. On the Royal College of Associations website, they have got videos and guidance on interviews on there if you wanted a little bit more information. Hopefully they will update that website so that they can tell you what the interviews are likely to be in the future. In terms of scoring, again, they have made everything fairly clear. So if you look through the pages, there's lots and lots of information on how things are scored, how you can get points. And what I would advise you to do is to have a look at that beforehand. If you are looking through your CV, looking through your portfolio, and you find that you've got lots of points in one area, but actually you can't score at all in others, then use the time that you have as an SAS doctor to try and get points in those other areas, because actually the more points you have, the more likely you are to be able to get an interview and progress through. As you can see on here, they've moved it into obviously this being for the online interview, both a clinical and a general interview. And you can see that they score them in different areas. So commitment to specialty, teaching, audit, quality improvement and research, reflective practice and qualifications and experience are part of your general interview. And then in your clinical, as I've discussed, decision making, reflective practice, team working and working under pressure. You then have a global rating, which is what this table on the right-hand side shows, and they will give you a score out of 10 to look at how you have performed and whether they consider your performance was good, normal, above standard or below standard. And all of that will come out to a mark of around 100. That was very brief, so I do apologise, but thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to take them at the end. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My turn now. It's my pleasure now to briefly give you an outline of the CSER process. By definition, this will only be a taster, and I'm aware that we're running a little bit behind, but hopefully you'll get a slight idea of this. I have no conflicts of interest, and my opinions here are based on experience as a CSER assessor. I have never gone. Sorry?
Your screen's not showing.
Oh.
It is for me.
I can see the screen.
Okay, carry on.
Okay. So my opinions are based on experience as a CSER assessor some years ago. I've never gone through the process myself, nor am I intending to. So what is CSER? CSER is basically the short abbreviation of the certificate you need if you wish to enter the GMC specialist register by an alternative route other than the normal training scheme that Sabrina has just outlined. What you have to do in order to achieve this certificate is demonstrate equivalence, and that is the key phrase here, with the knowledge, skills, and the professional competencies of someone who has basically at the time of your application just completed their CCT. In the process, most weight will be given to evidence from the last 5 years, and that's often a point of discussion, but that is laid out in relevant legislation. So what CSER is not is proof that you are a good anaesthetist, nor is it something that you get for long service as a long service award. It's not proof that you do a good job or that you do a job as good as the consultant in the theatre next to you. It's not required as something to guarantee you or give you a fulfilling career, or a ticket to respect, or a ticket to a consultant post, but it is a prerequisite. To become a UK consultant in a substantive post, you will have to be on the specialist register. So CSER is mostly relevant for people who have trained abroad and come to the UK after training elsewhere, but it is also increasingly relevant for SAS doctors who have done all their anaesthetic work in this country, or for people who just haven't followed the normal training path for whatever other reason here. Why would you do it? Well, as I've already said, you need specialist registration to be a UK consultant in a substantive post. You might find that a consultant post gives you enhanced credibility, maybe enhanced respect in your workplace, or just simply personal satisfaction. There are also for consultants better options and wider options for private practice. And of course, as we all know, and Reshma has talked about pay scales already, generally that's an option for better pay. So the process, how does this actually happen? Well, the application is made to the GMC, and the GMC makes the rules. So the applicant submits their evidence to the GMC, basically saying, I think I am equivalent to a current CCT holder. The GMC then quality checks the evidence against the standard they expect in that specialty, and most of that is essentially an administrative exercise. So they look at literally all the paperwork in inverted commas, because these days it's all online, and they scrutinize literally every page. Anything that they're not happy with, anything that doesn't meet the standard that they expect, they will send back to the applicant. Once they've done all this, if they're happy with the quality of the paperwork provided, and they make only a judgment of the quality, not the content, they then pass it to your Medical Royal College for evaluation. The college then assesses the application, and then make a recommendation to the GMC. Ultimately, it's the GMC's decision whether to enter the applicant on the specialist register or not. But generally speaking, they would follow the college's recommendation. And then the recommendations are the positive. Yes, the college recommends this person for the specialist register, or the application is rejected. But it comes then not with just a simple rejection, but it will say where the evidence was lacking. If evidence is lacking, it will be quite specific, and you then have the opportunity to potentially fix the gap, essentially. So you can request a review within 12 months. So what's the difference between a review and an appeal? An appeal is if you think they've got it wrong. They say, for example, give a simple example, you haven't got resuscitation training, but you know that resuscitation training was in your application, then you can appeal the outcome and say, actually, it is there on page 1137. And then they say, oops, and that's it. Success, job done. Now, that's actually very rare because the applications virtually impossible because the applications are scrutinized very thoroughly. A review is if they have identified a gap in your evidence. Let's say, for example, you haven't got enough pain training, then you get the opportunity to fix that. You do pain training, you get the relevant evidence. You then submit that for review within 12 months. And then the rest of the application doesn't have to be looked at again. Only the bit that was missing gets looked at. And if you then have supplied that to a satisfactory standard, you get through. If you don't do that within 12 months, you have to start from scratch. So what's the damage? Well, the damage is massive. This is a hugely time-consuming process. I think it would be fair to say that it will take you 12 months, even if you actually have got all the evidence. Just lining it all up, fitting all the gaps, creating paperwork that is to the standard they require will take you a year, probably longer. It's hugely emotionally draining, and it is also financially draining, and these are the costs. The evidence is all provided online and needs to be provided exactly as the GMC requests it. So that's in terms of format, validation from your employers, the quantity, translation requirements, anonymization, which people often fall foul of, and the order. So for example, if the GMC says your CV has to be done in chronological or reverse chronological order, they really mean it. It has to be really like that. You can't just say, oh, well, this will do. If you have any deficiencies in one area, you can't make up for it, and be reassured they will notice any gaps. So crossing your fingers behind your back, hoping that they might not notice, isn't going to work. So you have to show the knowledge and skills. So that's pretty much 75% of the whole thing, and the experience in all the areas that trainees would cover. And that includes in this specialty a test of knowledge. So that's either the FRCA or a test of knowledge that is considered equivalent for this purpose, and it must fulfill requirements in basic sciences. There's a list of test of knowledge exams from other countries that have in the past been recognized. And in the days of the now 2021 curriculum, you have to cover with your evidence all the 14 domains of the new curriculum and one specialist interest area. Now, the next few slides are very much based on my personal opinion, and other people might tell you differently. This is very much about how to start. What I would advise you to do is draw a massive mind map. And this is just an example of a mind map if you're not familiar with the concept. And basically take a massive piece of paper and write down everything that an anaesthetist in training would have to do over the course of 5 or 7 years within the training scheme. And in order to be able to do that, you will need to know what's in the curriculum of the trainees. So you have to become an expert in the current curriculum. You may also want to get some help from trainees and from an educator. So that could be your mentor or your educational supervisor or a local college tutor with this, so that you have a really good idea what's expected of a trainee. Then you need to take a very long and hard look at what you have done in your own training so far, and what you have evidence for. So anything that you have done but you haven't got any evidence for will not help you very much with that. So again, based on my experience, if that first mind map and the amount of evidence you have are not a very good match, this would be a very, very, very long journey for you to undertake. And I would personally suggest that you reconsider. If you find that's a reasonable match, but not a very good match, again, I think CSER is a very, very difficult task. Personally, I would advise you to maybe think about entering training at ST4 level, or maybe see whether the mismatch can be fixed by joining a CSER scheme. So there are some bigger hospitals that have CSER schemes to fulfill some of the requirements of the more sort of specialized domains. Now, entering training might seem slower potentially than the CSER process, but you have to remember there's some upsides to entering training. One of the upsides is that you are better protected in your training opportunities. You have an educational contract. If you come from abroad, you also learn soft UK skills and you create a network within your profession. And that is very, very valuable. And while you're in a training scheme, you also have a certain amount of job security. So it isn't all as bad as it sounds. If you do have a really good overlap and you want to do CSER, I wish you good luck. I suggest you read the instructions very, very carefully, then read them again and again. And don't worry about the statistics of how many people are successful. The statistics would say success rate's about 55%, but some people put in applications that are really very much way off the mark and they clearly haven't read the instructions properly. And some applications are unsuccessful at first attempt, but what they're told to fix, the gap is so small, they can fix it very easily and then they go through very quickly. But in the statistics, they turn up as unsuccessful in the first place. Be prepared, it's a long and difficult process. Where can you find further information? Well, the GMC has obviously got all the main information, in particular the specialty-specific guidance, and that's freely available without you having to pay any money. The college has information. Your college tutor may have information, but it might not be their specialist area. And the regional advisor should know about this. BMA also has information. I strongly suggest there is no need for commercial courses. You don't need to spend any extra money on this. The BMA charges a small fee for workshops, but it's quite a reasonable fee. There's also an excellent A-line, which is a northern anesthetic educational thing that you can find on Twitter. Excellent A-line webinar where people really know what they're talking about. And take advice from other people who have succeeded. Don't take advice from people who are in the process, because it can be the blind leading the blind. Also, advice from people not in your specialty is probably not quite as useful as from people who are actually doing it in the same specialty as you. So take advice from the people who've succeeded, in particular if they have trained in the same country as you have trained if you come from abroad. If you have specific questions, you can ring the advisors at the GMC or at the college, but you have to probably be quite specific. I think if you ring them and say, I would like to do CSER and how do I do it, that probably won't go down very well. There might be changes afoot. There's been talk about changes for years. The government needs more doctors, population needs more healthcare overall. It might become easier. I'm not too optimistic about this because we've talked about this for years, who knows. The 5-year rule might need to be eased because you may well be aware that many trainees take much longer than 5 years to do the bulk of their training. At the moment, that's a question of legislation, but even the GMC recognises that 5 years is quite a harsh rule. Who knows? And question and answers at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much indeed to Sabrina and Kirstin for their presentations about some of the alternative routes and food for thought. I hope we've given you a bit of information about the SAS role starting out and maybe 3 options of where you might wish to go with it. Developing your career within the SAS grade, going into a training post, or going for a CSER. We've got loads more information, resources. The SAS committee are always keen to hear from people and help people. Contact them through the association or via the SAS link scheme. We've had a few questions come in. A couple of them are, and I do apologise, we have run over time because the talks have just been too fantastic and too much information to get down. So a couple we can answer quite quickly. If you have any more questions, please pop them in the question board ASAP and we'll get to them. But one question we've had is how to find a mentor whilst working as a SAS in the same trust. There's various ways you can find a mentor. One is, I'll put a plug in for the Association of Anaesthetists Mentoring Scheme. Have a look on our website, Google, click on it, mentoring, and there is a scheme. It brings up a list of mentors in this. We all who've been through the association's training as trained mentors. Some might be in your trust, they might be in your region. These days, many people are willing to mentor face-to-face or online as well. So have a look at that. Your trust may well organise its own mentoring scheme. Some trusts do that, often for senior doctors, for consultants and SAS doctors. So have a look into that. You may well find informal mentoring amongst your peers. And I put a very strong suggestion, as Nilofer has mentioned, we've all mentioned, get to know your fellow SAS colleagues is a really important thing to do. The people who've been through it and done it already ahead of you are the best people to ask and advise. That's the SAS doctors with your specialty, but I suggest you make links with the SAS doctors in your trust for other specialties. It's more sociable, it's nice to know what's going on with people, and they're a great source of advice about other areas of trust. So that's 3 ways of finding a mentor, I would suggest, is through the association scheme, through your trust formal scheme, or informally through your contacts. And we're always looking for more mentors. So have a look on the association scheme. If you're interested in becoming a mentor, have a look. Next question, and I'm going to put it to Reshma for a brief answer, is if I'm on the 2008 contract, is it wise to move to the 2021 contract? So I'll ask Reshma to give a quick viewpoint. I think we've covered a bit, but Reshma, what would your view be on that?
It's a good question, but it can be quite complex. Which is the best decision for you? At what time? Whether it is a good time for you to move to the new contract. As I explained just now, we are waiting for some backdated pay. According to the newer revised pay scales, 4.5% pay increase has been given to those who are on the 2008 contract. So if you are currently on 2008 contract, please wait till I would say that please, it would be good for you to wait till you get the backdated pay. So I wouldn't rush to switch to the new contract at the moment, because you are expecting the backdated pay of 4.5% rise from April this year. Then depending on what is your current pay scale, and if you switch to the new contract, what will be your new pay scale, and there will be change in the working hours. The working day is to be in the new contract 2021. The hours has moved to 9 p.m. rather than 7 p.m. So will be useful for you to have a discussion with the employment advisor, the one which I mentioned on my slide, that BMA contact number. And after that, if you have any still more questions, please if you could contact your LNC rep, or write a more specific question to me on my email. I'll be happy to help. Thank you.
So, well, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Pop them in the chat now, or forever hold your peace is what I will say. So again, please come back to us at the SAS committee, contact us through the association if there's any more ongoing or anything more you'd like to know about what we're doing for SAS doctors, or how we can support those new to the SAS role. It's something we're very keen to do, is supporting our members throughout their SAS career, from its beginning to much later in its career, wherever you wish to go for it. So if there's anything more specific you think we should be doing or supporting you, drop us a line and please let us know. So I'd like to thank everyone so much for attending the webinar. Thank you for giving up your evening to attend this. I'd like to say a huge thank you to our panelists for their time and for sharing their expertise and wisdom with us so much. You'll receive an email tomorrow, which will give you instructions for the recording. You also received the delegate evaluation survey. Please fill us in honestly and truthfully. Tell us how terrible we were so we can improve for future events. But no, please do that. And please visit the association website for more upcoming online education. We've got some webinars coming up on near-infrared spectrometry and sustainability in pediatric anesthesia in the coming months, which is available for booking. There'll be more webinars coming up as it goes on. And equally, if you have suggestions for webinars you would like us to present, do get in touch with us and let us know. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Tom,
it's been a pleasure.
Sorry, Tom, can I say just to remind that Andrew is going to send those new revised pay scales and the contracts, because at the moment NHS employees is revising their site, so these are not available at the moment on website, so they're all will be emailed. to all the attendees.
And so I think that's what I would say, following up from Reshma's thing, is that the decision to move trusts, move contracts, will depend very much individually where you are on your journey as a SAS doctor. And I would advise you very carefully to look at both pay scales and compare them. You can ask HR for where pay scales, where you might be if you moved contracts, and to remember that the window is now open. It's not closed. You can move at any time, so you don't need to make a firm decision, but get the information that's right for you. So thank you very much. I shall ask Andrew to close down the webinar now, but thank you so much for attending, and I hope it's all been useful for you.
Thank you.